Welcome back to your daily dose. My name is Robert here with my good friend Benzi, Dr. Kluger. We've spent the better part of the last 2 hours together, which I'm so appreciative for breaking down all these ideas of what medicine is, can be, the potential futures, the pitfalls that are in front of us. And we ended our last segment really talking about the power of joy. And you've written about joy in particular. Tell me about the value of joy in medicine and perhaps the struggle to get it accepted as a aspect of or important, maybe vital even
Mhm.
part of the human experience.
Yeah, my interest in joy came up from two different angles. One was as I was doing clinical research and giving people various scales, our study coordinators were noticing that people didn't like filling them out. And when we asked them why, it was that your scales are depressing. And the way I would put it is that even our quality of life scale, that we measure quality of life from zero to negative shit. So it's like the best you could do on these scales is zero. Which is not why we wake up in the morning. It's
Hopefully
not,
not.
it's not. Well, I mean, some of us. I mean, there are times in our life where if I had no pain, that would be a good day.
Yeah.
But for a lot of us, and they're complementary. That you could have pain and pleasure at the same time in the same day. But for most of us, we want happiness. We don't just want an absence of depression. We want pleasure. And so that was interesting to me. I was like, yeah, you're right. These are depressing scales. We're measuring everything from zero in the negatives. So that was eye-opening for me. And then there was a profound moment we had when medical aid in dying was legalized in Colorado.
Mm.
I remember a visit when with our chaplain, and we had our team see everybody. There was a woman with cortical basal degeneration who was interested in medical aid in dying. And as we were going through our different things, our chaplain asked her, where did she find joy? What was she looking forward to? And she said, I find joy with my family. And he asked, follow-up question of like, how much more time would you like to spend with them? And her answer was, a lot more, you idiot. And but that moment changed things for that conversation. So rather than jumping into medical aid and dying, which she did eventually use, she had, I think, another 4 or 5 months that were really focused on having meaningful experiences with her family.
Mm.
So that was an opening. And I think for our team, it was this opening that we need to be every bit as thorough and systematic about assessing for sources of suffering as we are looking for opportunities for joy. And that became this hidden weapon for our team for working with people with serious illnesses that were incurable. Is that even if I can't cure, ALS or whatever, are there
Right.
opportunities for love and joy and meaning that we can take advantage of as long as you're alive?
Do you get accused of being Pollyanna by approaching things that way?
Yeah, it's a conversation that it comes up every time I give a lecture about this.
Hmm.
And the danger there is two dangers there. One I think is the danger of toxic positivity,
Sure.
which is a very, very real thing. And so we want to, make sure that I'm not saying that having ALS is not horrible.
Right.
I'm not saying that, this is a blessing in your life, even though there may be other blessings that come out of it. I'm not wishing it upon anybody. And I'm also not saying that if you, change your attitude, that you're going to be able to overcome this illness or anything else like that. It actually reminds me what an early experience I had when I was getting into palliative care was a woman with multiple systems atrophy whose husband was having her say positive affirmations every morning.
Mm.
Things like I can feel myself getting healthier every day. Today's a great day and stuff like that. And I remember when I asked her how she felt after saying these affirmations, she said she felt like shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So toxic positivity is a very real thing, and people with serious illness get a lot of it
You bet.
because they get a lot of emails about, if they prayed or if they took these vitamins or if you did whatever, then
Yeah.
their life would be better. So
You
that
got this. Do
yeah,
I? Do I?
right. So definitely don't want to do that. And then also, we don't want to do this in a way that's insensitive, and it can certainly be done in a way that's not sensitive. And it should be about the person in front of me, not about me. It's not about me wanting to believe that everything is joy and good.
Right.
But even in very, serious, sad visits, um, I'll say something that I want to acknowledge that, this is a horrible illness, that there's a lot of grief, and anger and frustration, and that I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about that and work through it. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge that you're still alive and that I don't want to miss the opportunity for love and joy and meaning if we can do that. And sometimes if it's a really bad visit, it might be as subtle as we've talked about some heavy things. I'd like you to do something nice for yourself, tonight or this weekend. But just to acknowledge that those things are important. And I think we live in a pretty puritanical culture, and medicine is also a pretty puritanical place.
Yeah.
I think there's some discomfort. I think people are more comfortable talking about suffering than they are talking about joy. And there's like
Yes.
this weird sense that joy is something that's more personal than suffering is.
Right.
That it's not,
And whimsical too. It's
yeah.
like it should only happen like it should if it floats down upon you, that it can't be cultivated. I mean, it's the reason why our improv class is called the Jam for Joy. And in fact, we were talking about there was some talk in our group about making them, connection labs. We wanted to try to put some serious next to what could be seen whimsical so that people recognize that it's true effort to bring forth the joy, and that we're playing our way into that feeling, to cultivate, to manifest, to become. And one of the places we meet that I think joy becomes very self-evident is laughter.
Mhm.
And when we can agree on a laugh, um, all of a sudden we become differently human, I think. The laughter in me sees the laughter in you, and wow, isn't this whole life thing fucking crazy? And all of a sudden, it's like the depressurization is massive, and you see shoulders just drop. You can feel the breaths become deeper. Um, do you do any work or have you done any research on the power of laughter within joy or the constructs, how they line up?
Uh, I have not specifically. I would note that, which may seem weird for people from outside, is that I think our team and our patients oftentimes laugh more than people in other clinics, and that may seem, kind of a weird thing from the outside until you really get what it is that we're doing.
Should measure it. You should.
Yeah,
Honestly, I think it's valuable data. Your laughs are valuable.
yeah. So it is something that comes up, and as you say, it's a way that we, as humans, that we deal with reality.
Mhm.
Humor is it's a powerful tool. It's a way to help us to let go. It's a way to help us to um, to trust. I mean, I guess in some ways it's part of the reasons why improv is both wonderful and scary.
Yes,
Uh,
that's the razor's edge.
I think that joy and humor, gives us some safety and vulnerability might be a way to say it. But it provides an opening into this vulnerable space
Let
that
me
can
ask
be,
you,
yeah.
because you were in the room for the screening, the only screening we've had of Boys of Summer Third Base. That was the world premiere. And I think I talked to you a little bit afterward when I was still kind of overwrought myself. I mean, I intended with that film for it to be interactive, right? And it's a risk. You never really know if that's going to work. It's the high wire act with the film because it's a static thing. Do people buy it or not, right? As we say, the gosh, what's the phrase I'm looking for? But it's the disconnect, the allowing yourself to the suspension of disbelief. There it is. Suspension of
Mhm.
disbelief is what we're looking for. And that's a huge investment, not only to put yourself into the film, but as you saw and I think participated to a degree with that audience, they sang, they danced, they laughed, and they shouted out suggestions like they were in the room with the screen me who
Mhm.
was talking to a group of people. Talk to me about your feeling being in that room and the construct of everything we're putting about connection is medicine, because that's a very different type of movie experience than a passive talk to me sage on the stage thing. it was soliciting, and people felt very comfortable, apparently, responding in that way, a joyful way to it. There's a lot of joy in that theater.
Yeah. Um, one, well, and I don't know, I guess it'll be interesting to see as you socialize this movie in different places, how it goes. The World Parkinson Congress, I love the World Parkinson Congress. It's kind of a special place. And they do a great job of creating a supportive community. And so I think it was the perfect place to have your first showing. And it really, I think, highlights some of the strengths of the World Parkinson Congress in terms of building that community and building that kind of willingness of people to support each other, to show up authentically. Um, there, I'm trying to think. I mean, it seemed like a group that it didn't take a lot of prodding to get them into it.
No, and and here's the thing. I mean, I've done a lot of theater. I've run a theater before, and we had some theatrical elements. When people lined up, of course, it had been primed. We'd been talking to them. This was day three, of the conference. At the end, we made sure people got their popcorn on the way in. That as after I gave my very brief introduction, that they launched the baseball volley, the baseball beach balls into the air, so people felt hopefully like it was what they feel at a baseball game or some other kind of interactive environment where, oh, I'm not just here to watch. And then the very first thing they see on the screen is a solicitation to let's clap our hands. And once they
Mhm.
get that, I think the rest of the thing unlocks to go, oh, that's what we're doing here. We're yes and that becomes inherent part and parcel. It will be interesting, like you say, and we're lining up right now. There are a lot of people who are interested in having the film. What we're trying to do is connect not just the film as a screening, because we've done that with the third film, Shortstop, and that's been wonderful. It's 53 minutes, just show it, set it and forget it. It's great, it works. But this is, we're saying, a half-day symposium. We're calling it the Boys of Summer Third Base Connection is Medicine experience, because we want to have the screening, which will take some setup. I think the right type of room, and there will be, we'll have to put on like some music that is the right thing, have, maybe some snacks or something. I'll certainly have those beach balls again so that people will be primed to start the right way.
Mhm.
And then afterward, what we didn't have there that was a real miss was there'll be a Q&A, number one, because we were forcibly kicked out of the room for the next film. But then, in theory, we'd have lunch where people could, just kind of
Mhm.
converse, and then come back for what we call the Connection is Medicine experience. And that could be a lot of things. Is that a panel of local people who are involved where we're dissecting, playing with, interacting with, the folks who are there to say, what do you feel about connection? What is connection? Maybe showing clips of different things and saying, how did you experience connection in watching that? Or how would you XYZ? So this whole domain of connection is medicine becomes a massive, it's not just a sprinkling, but hopefully a whole garden seeded, and people feel empowered. And there's a workbook that I'd have with them. Everyone leaves with the Connection is Medicine field guide, is what we're calling it. Take this with you, keep playing with it, keep interacting, as it were, because the film should be the kickoff, not the summary,
Mhm.
right? That's the idea. How does that sound to you?
No, it makes sense. I mean, yeah, as you said, you didn't have a time to do the full experience.
Yeah.
So I think using that as a springboard into working on other things, I think is great. I think part of the film and why it worked, as I'm recalling, I think you did it might have been part of the film, but I think even outside of the film, you did a personal introduction. And as part of that, and I think both before the film and in the film, you were vulnerable and imperfect. So that, I mean, I think that was also an important part of things. I mean, there are times where perfect people, do that and you can get crowd participation or whatever, but it's a different kind of feeling.
Well, it happened in the
That
film,
if
and
it's, yeah.
when I shot it, I mean, I knew I was very physically overwrought when it happened. It came together rather quickly. I needed to do it because I was worried about my dad's health. It was a window of opportunity. Said we're just going to do this. Got this little theater, got enough people to show up so we could make it look like even more than it was. And I got out there and dad was horribly dyskinetic. And I'm like, I didn't even know if he was going to make it. He wanted to be there, but he was having a terrible night. And I mean, one of the things, there was all these live elements of it, was me performing songs and jokes throughout the experience. And one of the songs, I completely forgot the lyrics and I kept it in the film
Right.
for that reason, right? To basically say, I screwed up, and to give the audience that celebration of failure. And I saw two things today that yes anded that in a way. One is Martin Short's film, Life is Short, Marty. Have you heard about that? It's a documentary of his life. It's beautiful. And he in that film, he talks about at least 80% of his career is failure. That number bumps up to like 90% later on, and then has another friend comedian who says, yeah, 98% of what I do is failure. And talking about that and how difficult and painful and yet how necessary it is to go
Mhm.
through that, especially in a world where we put up on Facebook only the great things.
Right.
And then Ryan Reynolds, similarly talking to um, what's his name? The gentleman who plays Wolverine. It's gonna kill me. Our Aussie. Um,
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman. Gosh, I feel terrible for forgetting his name. Him and Hugh, obviously good friends from doing Deadpool and Wolverine. And again, in talking about how he needs to show his kids his imperfections a lot. They're still little. Of course, as they get older, they see all of our imperfections.
Right.
But when they're little, and they might see, oh, daddy won this award, daddy made this. He's like, they need to see daddy screwed up, daddy failed, daddy X, Y, to see the whole thing.
Mhm.
Where does that fit for you on the spectrum? Because I'm guessing as a doctor, there's probably some veneer that needs to or is encouraged to look impervious, is
Mhm.
encouraged to look know-it-all. So where does failure fit within the scope of the doctor, and how do we make the doctor more human by allowing reasonable failure, as it were, to exist in his, her, their world?
Yeah. But before doing that, I don't know if this is already part of your plan for the movie, but something I've thought about uh, is that what makes it easier or what makes more likely for a patient and family to have a successful journey with Parkinson's or ALS or whatever. Connection's a big thing. And so we play a lot of emphasis on individual resilience, but I also think about like social resilience and building resilient network. But the other thing I think is ability to improv. And when I have a patient who's, it's a couple where they're engineers and they want to have everything planned out and they want to know everything. Like there are some things that bode well for them. I mean, because they will be prepared and they'll have their ducks in a row. And there's other things that I'm worried for them.
Yeah.
And I've thought about, can there be, like having a serious illness 101 course or something like that. But I think improv would be part of that and being able to find, the funny side of errors, being able to pivot, being able to do all those things. So yeah, whether or not it fits in the film, I mean, that is something I've thought
Thank you.
about. It's something that other people, I think there's been work with Second City in Chicago, where they've worked with people with dementia and caregivers. And so there's thoughts about how do we work this in. But getting back to your thing about with doctors, I mean, one is just teaching doctors that it's okay to say I don't know, and that is it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing. I mean, to experience. It's tough to be vulnerable in that way. It depends on the thing that you don't know what to say about. But I think people can appreciate that. I think one of the things that can be dangerous is when doctors think that things that they don't know don't exist.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's something that comes up quite a bit. Um, it's like I've never heard of that, so it must not be a real thing.
Wow. Talk about a narcissistic view of the world, right?
Yeah, so that's something I don't know if you've experienced that, but that is
Yeah,
definitely something that happens in medicine and that I saw as a medical student and said I don't want to be that doctor.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So saying I don't know, and it can be it's tough. I would say, part of what brought me into palliative care, and I think part of what makes palliative care seem so difficult to a lot of people in neurology is that I oftentimes see patients after their doctors have told them there's nothing more I can do.
Mm.
which is an awful thing to have to say.
Mm.
And there are things, sometimes there are things that I can do. And sometimes the things that I can do are pretty simple, which is just it sounds like you're experiencing grief. Just to be silenced, just to say, you know, I wish things were different.
Make space for grief. No, I mean,
Just to be
grief is one of
there.
the huge ones, right? Grief
Yeah,
and shame. Make room for them.
yeah,
Accept that they're there.
yeah. I think it's very hard, to get to your point. I think one of the skills, like the ninja skills of palliative care, is being okay with not being able to fix everything. I mean, that's a big part of why people go into medicine. And actually, as I've gotten into the personal side of my work, I don't know how many other people have a similar story, but when my grandfather died when I was 4, was kind of when I was first confronted with human impermanence, and I, really developed a death terror. And I didn't like time. I didn't like growing up.
Mm.
Um, and and I think medicine and science, it, maybe not totally consciously, but offer this promise of control and in some ways kind of like offer this model of hope that you don't have to deal with these things. And I think there's a lot of caring people who are drawn to medicine, you know, running away from the same fears that I've run away from and running towards this hope of being able to control things and to help others. So it's not just a narcissistic thing. I think there's a very important streak of kindness and compassion and stuff that's underlying all of this. So I don't, I think the majority of doctors are big-hearted people, and they're in this helping profession because they want to help people. And some of it gets to a quote that I like from Daniel Sulmasy, who wrote a book. He's one of our leading figures in medicine on bringing spirituality back into medicine. I think he quotes a rabbi saying that in order to heal a person, you have to first be a person.
Mm.
And it gets back to your point about, how do we get over perfection? And I think part of my journey into doing palliative care was getting back to my 4-year-old self and confronting my fear of death and working with that and working with my vulnerabilities and, getting to know myself in this deeper way. And so for me, I learned a lot about palliative care, but I think equally important was work I did with Zen Buddhism and other spiritual practices to get to a comfortable place where I was able to open my heart enough to hear the scary things people wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and that's it, allowing space for those things. And you open up something that's probably bigger than we have time for right now, but just the idea of narrative medicine as a concept, number one, and then as a construct potentially in one's medical training to understand, what is your reason for becoming a doctor? What's your story, in other words, because that's going to affect the kind of doctor you are. And like you said, the sooner you can unpack that, the sooner you can be more clean in how you deliver, as opposed to through perhaps a trauma or whatever it was that drove you into that space. And that's not to question or tease out anybody's reason for doing it. It's just to say we've all got bias, right? And stories are a form of bias that we develop over time. So by understanding that story, we therefore can recognize our human, it's not a fallibility to have a story. It's just a mechanism of how our brains work. We understand that our brains are patterning machines that story tell. Therefore, we can make space for someone else's story and also recognize the importance of that, even if we're not there for all of it, just to set them on their journey to say, there's a lot of story to be told here that you're not aware of yet. And that's no fault of your own. It's because you didn't know this information until now, and it's going to bring up a lot of different things. Transformations happening
Yeah.
regardless. It's a question of whether or not you're going to believe it is or isn't, right? Delta's the one constant.
Yep.
So that's what stories help us with, is to accept that transformation is constant.
hmm and getting back to the beginning of this episode of, how do we make this change happen? Is in my training, and I think it's still this way a lot, is the kind of common wisdom was to have a professional distance.
Mm.
And it was not to look at, your place on this pedestal and stuff like that, not to question it. As opposed to, getting into narrative medicine, trying to show up authentically, paying attention to the feelings that come up as you're talking to people rather than push them down or pivot. Basically, how do you work your way through feelings as opposed to, how do you manage them?
Right.
And again, that's not hasn't traditionally been part of the culture of medicine.
Mm.
And I think it's because of this myth of, like of the perfect doctor and of pure science and all of these things. But a theme in the book that I'm working on is thinking about medicine as a human endeavor, not as a purely scientific endeavor. So this is a human endeavor. It's done by people. It has a history of people. It's driven by people's fears and loves and joys. And that if we understand medicine in this way, I think it's only going to enrich it. It's only going to make it more powerful. I think people have a fear that if we do that, either we're going to fall apart or medicine's going to fall apart.
Absolutely.
And I
That,
would
that
argue
there,
the opposite.
the vulnerability, right? Vulnerability is everyone's greatest fear, and yet it is always shown to be our greatest strength once it's out there. It's the fear of vulnerability. The actual practicality of vulnerability exposes the truth, which allows for the strength to become for and to recognize what the vulnerability shows more often than not is that thing you were scared of, you're not alone.
Hmm.
A lot of people fear that, and it's very human to fear that. And great, now that it's out of the bag, it has light on it, the great disinfectant. We can talk about it honestly instead of talking around it or hiding it or, all the silly things we do because we're humans. Well, this has been amazing. Did I miss anything that you want to hit before we get going? I mean,
I don't think so. Yeah, we've
no.
certainly have another 10 episodes or something, but I'll have to save that for
I'm
another
sure we
day.
could. Yeah. Thank you for your time, your generosity, your kindness, your spirit. To the very top thing you said when we began almost 2 hours ago. Yeah, congratulations on your new program. And if indeed I am possible to be part of it, it sounds like I should be. We'll talk offline about that. So
Sounds
thank
good.
you again for everything you do, Benson.
Absolutely. Yeah, have a good evening. We'll be in touch.
All right. This has been your daily
Take
dose,
care.
everybody. Take care.